Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the debut record for Morpholith, Dystopian distributions of mass-produced Narcotics, on October 24th on Interstellar Smoke Records. This album has 7 tracks, 61 minutes in length, and they are an Icelandic psychedelic doomstoner metal band. When it comes to the design of this record, the album doesn't have much to offer. The sound of this record almost determines what kind of experience the record is going to have, and therefore the overall structure of the album doesn't do much in order to change that perspective. It's an album that's very balanced, very cohesive. I would go as far as to say that it's even linear, even though there are some changes, there are some ebbs and flows, mostly within songs, not necessarily from track to track, but it's not enough to take away from the overall experience that this album gives. An experience that feels like the record stays very close together, doesn't wiggle, there are no breaks, it just stays on course. Being 61 minutes in length emphasizes all of these attributes, because had the album been a little bit shorter, you can make the record feel a little bit more dynamic by bringing into the forefront those uniquenesses that each track has in store for the listener. Extending the length of the album into 61 minutes minimizes those nuances and emphasizes the globality of the record, the experience that you feel when you get to that last song, to that last second. As far as the sound is concerned, I mentioned that the band are Icelandic, but most important, they are a psychedelic doomstoner band. And that's extremely true from the sound, because there are psychedelic elements, there are doom elements, and there are stoner elements throughout the entire record. The album really feels like a combination of those three factors. It's not of one of those records where you can say one song is a little bit more of one, the other one is a little bit more of the other. I didn't get that experience from this record. I felt like the record stayed true to those 3 common denominators and walked the line that perhaps separates them, but at the same time brings them together. It's a well-rounded sounded album, considering that those are the main 3 ingredients of the record. When you think of a doom album, you think of a record sound-wise that's going to bring you down, that has this somber mood. This record definitely has that. When you think of a stoner metal album, you think of some fuzziness on the guitars, and that being the core element that drives the sound, that drives the record. This album definitely has that. When you think of psychedelic rock, you're thinking of some riffs that give you this atmosphere that takes you into that arena of psychedelics that almost transports you into this outer body experience. This record also has that. So it's an album that brings in these 3 elements, combining them in order to construct interesting songs that have their own individual dynamics, that offer different perspectives or slightly different perspectives, like moving from a sound that has more of a stoner, grimier sounding riff into a more clear riff where the psychedelic rock presence is more emphasized. But overall, the doom element, the doom aspect of their sound is perhaps the one that stays consistent throughout the entire record, with the other 2 elements coming in, together almost as a tag team in order to create those nuances and those slight ebbs and flows that the tracks have. So it's a very well-constructed record from that perspective. It's also an album that sound-wise surprised me by not being dense. When you think of doom, when you think of stoner, you think of an album that sound-wise feels dense, sounds dense. It's not the case with this record. The record actually feels at times a little bit lighter. It has a little bit more room to breathe, or at least it has slight variations and offering pockets within songs that definitely have the ability to let the songs breathe a little bit better. Not being an overly dense album plays into the playability and quality of the individual songs, without a doubt. Had this album been a record that from a production standpoint and from a sound standpoint had that overall dense experience, being at 61 minutes, it would have been a very hard album to navigate through. It would have just been very hard to digest and process from the listener standpoint, regardless of how much you love these genres, regardless of how much you may love this experience. So creating a production behind the album that emphasizes all of the different elements, guitars, drums, bass, vocals, and being dynamic in the vocals, these are all elements that make this record more palpable, considering the overall length of the album and the genre and sound that the band produces. Now, within that sound, I enjoyed the drums and guitars tremendously. I also enjoy the fact that the bass doesn't overpopulate these tracks. They didn't let the bass, overgrow over the sound, and they kept the bass controlled and allowing the bass to have its moments, but not being an element that becomes very jarring in the overall perspective. This is a record that, from a guitar standpoint, allows that fuzziness of the guitars to be the main ingredient that they offer. But they also offer some psychedelic rock elements, some more melodic elements, elements that allow to thin out some of these songs and some of the experience. The drums felt a little bit more subdued, and they felt a little bit more subjugated to the guitar sound, having that been the one in the forefront leading the charges. I would have liked to see the guitars keep that movement and keep that sense of being up front, but allowing the drums a little bit more of a headway and allowing them to fluctuate a little bit more to try to create some lateral movement in order to spread these tracks a little bit more. I still enjoy the record the way it sounds, but I think there's room for upgrade as far as the drums are concerned in terms of the impact that they can give to the overall sound perspective on these tracks. When it comes to the vocals, the clean vocals on this record are phenomenal because they create this more doom experience. They bring this more somber and even melancholic experience to the record that allows them to have this yin and yang when it comes to the harsher side of the vocals and that cleaner side of the vocals. I think had they gone with just one approach, or have one approach be the predominant one, the album perhaps would have been a little bit stale vocally. Having this dynamic makes the album more engaging. It makes the album better from what it represents, at least when it comes to the vocal performance, giving a lot more life, becoming a lot more rich all around. And when you start to look at this record, when you start to look at all of these pieces, for a debut album, this is definitely an album that has a lot of quality. Now, I feel like there is still some fat that could be trimmed. Like I said, the length of the album, in my opinion, hurts the overall playability. It slows down things and it extends it. And I think an album like this, due to the nature of the sound, due to the nature of its own experience, it needed to be a little bit shorter so that the listener can feel a little bit more comfortable in the overall experience and not necessarily overwhelmed by it. The other element, like I said, the drums, I would have liked to see the drums play a little bit more of a lateral movement role. Outside of these two elements, the record for a debut album really surprised me, and it surprised me on a positive note, and not having that density of sound, not allowing the sound to not be defined, and having that fuzziness of the guitars completely bleed over everything was one of the most positive experiences from a record like this. I was definitely not expecting this level of production and this end result that comes with it, and I was happily surprised to see it. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Mountainous. This is a mountainous of a track. First of all, it's the opening track, over 10 minutes in length. What a way to start the record. These guys really don't want any success whatsoever. So having a song like this starting off the album might feel a little bit jarring. It might feel a little bit too much to digest, especially if you're a new listener coming in and this is the first time you're listening to the band. Not necessarily the design or the approach that I would take, but when I look at the song itself on its own merit, it's a great track, regardless of the length. And it's a song that once you press play and you start listening to it, it has a welcoming experience to it, and it's a song that really defines what the rest of the album is going to be. It defines it from a sonic perspective, it defines it from a vocal perspective, it defines from a construction perspective, it defines it in terms of the ebbs and flows that each and individual song have. So this is a track that lays all the groundwork for the rest of the album, and if you can make it past these 10 minutes and really enjoy this song, this is one of the best songs on the entire record. So if this song, due to its quality, if this song captivates you, you're going to be in for the rest of the album. If this song becomes too jarring, it's going to be nearly impossible to navigate through the rest of the album. Next we have Narcofactory. The bass sound that opens up the track, excellent. Excellent quality, excellent texture, excellent in terms of how it sits in the mix. The vocals on this track are very haunting, or they move from that more clean vocal haunting perspective into the more cavernous, infused delivery, and that to me creates dynamics within the track. It's a track that also has a lot of psychedelic rock elements to it, and those come in once the fuzziness of the guitars dissipates. So once the stoner side of the sound, the stoner doom side of the sound becomes diluted, the psychedelic rock comes in and infuses some energy and infuses some drive into the overall song. So it's a track that lives off of these two moments, and then not only lives off of these two moments musically, it lives off of the two different perspectives vocally as well. The clean vocals with a more haunting experience, screaming harsher vocals with a little bit more of an aggressive experience behind them. Really interesting song because of this change, this paradigm that exists between these two elements and the different experiences that they give. Last but definitely not least, Hellscaper. The fuzzy guitar sound takes control of this track. It creates a really cool sound and it creates a really cool atmosphere, but they dominate the entire song. The clean vocals help open up the track, and I think that's an important element on this song because sound-wise, having the fuzzy guitars stay consistently in the forefront from start to end would make the song feel not only very linear, but very compact and not offering enough movement. So having the clean vocals come in definitely makes the track feel a little bit thinner. It makes the track stretch out. It gives it a little bit more bandwidth. So it's a nice addition to a song that musically really needed it, because musically there's nothing that does it. So having the vocals replace perhaps a little bit more of a melodic guitar or something like that definitely gives quality to the overall track, and it makes this song, while feeling very linear all around, it gives it some energy and it gives it some lateral movement. This is it. This is Morpholith's debut record, coming out October 24th on Interstellar Smoke Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band. Hit me up in the comment section. I'll see you all at the next video.